Hi everyone, media representation of crime, week number 1. Right, we're going to look at how media represents crime and how they focus very much on certain types of crime. We're going to look at how it differs to official crime statistics, so we need to think about, well, how real is what the media is portraying. Does the media themselves cause any crime? And what impact on public perception may media representation have? Okay, reporting of crime. A large proportion of news coverage is on crime. Ericsson in 1991 said that anything between 45 to 71% of quality press and radio was to do with crime or deviance. 45 to 71%, a massive difference, isn't it there? So, Ericsson, what are you doing? Williams and Dickinson said that up to 30% of all newspaper coverage tends to be on crime or deviant behaviour. We're going to look a little bit into why maybe the press do that kind of thing. So is it an accurate representation? Well, not according to some people. It overrepresents violent and sexual crime. So Ditton and Duffy carried out a study where 46% of all media reports were on violent and sexual crimes, but only 3% of all recorded crime is actually violent or sexual crime. So big disparity there in numbers. Marsh in 91 said that the reporting of crimes such as sex and violence crimes were 36 times more likely than that of property crime to be reported. So there's this idea that certain types of crime really good for the media and they like reporting on them. Felsen came up with this idea of an age fallacy in the media as well, where most crimes, the media portrays most criminals and victims as older and more middle class than those who are normally found in the justice system. So if we look at official crime statistics that we've been looking at over the last few weeks, a lot of them say they're very much based on working class and lower class young men particularly, where there's an age fallacy when it comes to the media because they focus on a different type of criminal and victim. There's an exaggerated police success in the media as well. Now, what you need to bear in mind is that who is releasing these success stories? Well, it's the police, and so they are the source of them. So that might have a problem with it, but also the types of crimes as well. So if these violent crimes are being reported, violent crimes are a lot easier to clear up than it is, say, property crimes or such as burglary and things like that. So obviously the police are being successful in what is being reported in the news. There's an exaggerated risk of victimisation as well. So the press are very much looking at white women, middle to upper class status as being the victims of crime. Now that could be because that is the interest story, or that is just what the media want to actually portray. Media also look at separate events rather than the whole picture, so they never really look at these underlying causes. However, when I was thinking about this and reading up on it, I was thinking about the Daily Mail and how the Daily Mail blame everything on immigration. So maybe that is changing a little bit. So if we are going to analyse these ideas and maybe hire some evaluation at it, Daily Mail and their immigration thing might be something that goes against this idea of separate events. Final thing about representation of crime and maybe being exaggerated a bit is this overemphasis on extraordinary crimes. Felsen pops up with these fallacies again. Dramatic fallacy being that there's very much a focus on drama crime, so things that are really shocking. So a bit of a dip in kind of what maybe is classed as boring or common crimes, and also this ingenuity fallacy where you have to be very clever to be able to either commit these crimes or to solve these crimes, or you need to be daring or a bit adventurous. Whereas when you think about it, majority of people who are committing crimes are just normal everyday people for different reasons, so you need to think about that. All of these, though, the reason why the media do it, surely, is just to sell newspapers or to sell their programmes. So you need to take into consideration their needs as well. So they might be skewed. They're not necessarily doing it because the police are telling them that they're solving crimes, or that white women are the ones who are victims. They've got to think, okay, who are the main people who buy who are paper? Well, white women. Okay, well, we need to make sure we kind of sell our stories towards that kind of demographic. So there's been changes in the way that crimes are reported and what types of crimes are reported as well. So as crime goes up, particularly certain crimes like petty crimes, murders and stuff like that, press don't really report on them as much. Think about Felson's dramatic fallacy, then it kind of makes sense, because people don't want to read about the same kind of crimes, they want to read about new crimes, etc. Okay, and Schlesinger and Tumblr reported on this and found that these types of crimes really decreased in interest, so obviously didn't turn up in the media as much. Southall and Walby said that the press have this preoccupation with sex crime, so there's been an increase in reporting of sex crime, but is there an increase in actual sex crimes happening, or is it because this is what the public or the media deem the public want to read about? And they believe that since the early 90s there's been a major rise in the amount of reporting of cases, and even looking from the 1950s through to the late 1980s, there was a big increase to nearly all quarter of cases in the news were on sex crimes. With that, though, there's also a distortion of who is committing this kind of crime. So if you imagine when you see these newspaper articles, it's like a sex fiend, or these strangers, rapists who wear kind of like balaclavas and black clothes and hoodies and stuff like that. Think back to what we discussed a few weeks ago about what kind of sex offence is committed most and where it happens, and it's a bit of a distortion of who's committing these crimes. There's this idea that crime and news reporting of crime is socially constructed, and I think that's definitely the case, especially when you think about what is being reported in the news and why. Okay, so crime doesn't just like turn up. Reporters have to go out there and find it, and they choose what it is that they put into their newspapers or news programs. Okay, Stanley Cohen and Jock Young believe that basically news isn't discovered, but it's actually manufactured. So what these reporters and editors and things like that have to do is think about this criteria of worthiness. So is this worthy of going into the news? So things such as immediacy, how recently has it happened? If it's very recent, especially with the internet and social media and things like that, it's easy to report things that happen real time, let alone that have happened quite recently. As we've already discussed, the dramatisation, how dramatic is it? Is it going to shock people? Personalisation as well. Celebrities appear quite a lot in the news, especially when it comes to criminal activity. Think about Ched Evans, Michael Lavelle, Rolf Harris, people like that. The editors and reporters think, well, can people relate to these people, and are they going to be shocked by it? So there's a rise in the celebrity idea. The status of people, obviously the higher the status, the better. Novelty factor as well. Some of them look at it from like a fun angle. Crime from a fun angle is pretty bad, if you ask me, but can they is it like a novelty thing? So if you think back to the guy Bobbitt in America quite a few years ago, whose wife basically chopped his penis off in revenge. Now that's a crime, but the term like, oh, he's had a bobbit and stuff like that, it's kind of, dumbing down crime, so to speak. So yeah, there's that idea as well. Also the risk. They're more likely to put in the news about, like, say, a granny having her bag snatched and maybe falling over and what have you, than say like a 25-year-old white woman. So obviously the idea about the victim being the centre of the story, about them being vulnerable and fearful and stuff like that. And also violence. Violence is, it's really good for the media. They like to see violence. It sells, basically. As well as the media, we've also got fictional representation of crime as well. Mandel carried out a study in 1984, and basically said that between 1945 and 84 there was something like 10 billion crime thrillers shown and sold on TV, DVDs, videos, etc., etc. Well, it wouldn't have been DVD in 1984, would it? And also 25% of all TV had some sort of criminal activity in it, and 20% of all films. It's quite a lot. Surratt looked at these ideas of how fictional crime is represented, and there's a law of opposites, so it's very closer to fiction than it is to reality. So thinking about it's very rarely property that's is shown. That they're not going to show you many burglaries. It tends to be like rape and violence and murder and things like that. Real life homicides are very rarely carried out by someone who's so cold and calculated. It normally comes from a brawl or a dispute. Very rarely psychopathic or strangers commit these kind of crimes as well. It's normally people who are close at home. But again, it doesn't make very good TV, does it? And you think about it, cops nearly always get the man. So it's shown police officers to be very successful at what they're doing. Some would argue that that isn't necessarily the case. Okay, so thinking about media as a cause of crime, media get a very negative press, and they say that they have a negative influence on people, and this has happened throughout times. It's not just a new phenomenon. So they were talking about in the 1920s and 30s, cinema came out and were to blame for a lot of young people acting irresponsibly. In the 1950s, there was a lot of horror and even in the printed press coming out. And that went all the way through to, say, the 1980s and 90s with rap music, Grand Theft Auto and stuff like that. So it's not a new phenomenon, but it's something that it's more highlighted now, I suppose. Number of ways that it could be possible that they cause crime. So they could, they glamorise the offenders. So the bad guys are often seen as still quite good. If you think about Pulp Fiction and stuff like that, people going around just shooting people and blowing people's head off, but they make it look really cool. So they glamorise it in that way. This idea of copycat, where you imitate the roles. If you think about, there's been quite a lot in the press about how people go out and, like the lad in America who dressed up as the Joker, I think it was, during the Batman film, and started shooting people. So there's this idea that it was a copycat. It actually, I've always wondered this, gives techniques. I've always thought, why do they tell people how to commit the crime? Or such and such committed a crime in this way. Someone's going to be sitting at home thinking, oh my god, that's really good. I think I may go on and do it myself. There's arousal as well. Some people do get turned on by the idea of sexual crimes and stuff like that. Desensitization, the more we see it, the less we become sensitive to what's happening. Advertising as well, this idea that adverts are there for these unaffordable goods, but showing that everyone kind of has to have it, so these norms and cultural values and stuff like that. Police are sometimes portrayed as very incompetent, so although they might get the guys, they normally bundle around for a bit and they don't get them straight away. It takes them ages to get them. But does the media have such a negative effect? Well, some people don't think they have that much of a negative effect. So Schramm et al. Carried out a study on children's viewing in the 1960s, and they said that neither really affects harmful or beneficial. Some children are affected by it, some people aren't. And it kind of links into this individual meaning of what you're watching. Livingston said, yeah, although people may not be affected by it, we are still concerned about the effects, especially with children, so we tend to lead children away from watching certain types of program. And it raises a fear of crime as well, and an unrealistic fear of crime. So the media gives us this impression of what crime is going on, and we automatically think, oh my god, that's going to happen to me. Well, it's not necessarily the case. Gerbener, Schlesinger and Tumblr said that the higher user you are of media, then the more likely you are to be fearful. But correlation always equal proof? Not necessarily. These people might not be afraid of going out, so they watch more TV. It could be chicken and egg thing. What happens first? And then Sparks basically says that it's down to the individual meanings of what they're viewing. So it's an interpretivist view that we have to take into consideration what every single person takes from what they're watching. And then the portrayal of what is normal. So left realists argue that it's down to advertising and portraying what a normal family and a normal person looks like, and that increases this sense of relative deprivation. So we go out to commit crime to make sure that we can get all of these things that people say that we need. And there's a media standardization of lifestyle. Sorry I rushed so much. See you all later next week. Bye bye.